Hello, Goobers. It's me, your favorite Goober. Despite it being 1 in the morning, I find myself in a lively spirit here, which is good. I'm going to be yapping about Project Fear, and more specifically, keeping my promise to talk about the question I posed a couple days ago. And that question being, what does it mean to use my power system? Some have considered if that was a philosophical question. What does it mean to use my power system? But I'd like to say that, truthfully, initially, the question stood more as a technical one. What does it mean to use the power system in my universe? How does that work? What happens when you use it? Um, One thing that I've seen online multiple times was the concept of a power system, both of complexity, but also one with a cost, one with limitations. Instead of it being a power system where if a character has a higher number, they win by default. In this case, a power system with limitations and costs would allow for characters to have an advantage or the opposite, have a disadvantage, which can sway potential victories even if in isolation characters might differ in power, one being stronger and the other clearly being weaker. Perhaps the situation just lends to the weaker one having the advantage, which can press the victory in their favor. But to me, I felt like that was just always the right way to go about it. I don't need to be reminded by content. And when I thought about Project Fear, I thought about how that would apply to my power system. And I wondered what I can do to better give it that cost of usage. And one idea that I'd come up with was, simply put, you have to face your fear every time you want to use your power. And if you're afraid, you might not perform your best. But I didn't know how I felt about that, so I kind of sidelined that idea. And I thought about it because that idea led me to another one. And that one was interesting because it enlightened me uh, to something I already knew about but didn't consider yet: exposure therapy. In my universe, there's some specifics. I won't go into every detail, but the rough idea that I can give you is that when you are afraid of something, enough so, you can manifest a power. And there's also, something to do with a monster, but I won't dive into every little detail here. The point is, you can manifest a power. And we're going to focus on that detail here. When you manifest that power, what does that mean? If you have to be afraid of something enough so, what happens if you're afraid of another thing? People have multiple fears. I might not be as afraid of spiders anymore, but to be fair, they creep me out a little bit, and that's a minor fear. I do have a fear of heights, but that doesn't mean just because I have a fear of heights, I no longer fear spiders, right? People can be afraid of things, and in this universe, it wouldn't make too much of a stretch to assume that somebody can be really, really afraid of more than one thing. I think that's really fair, right? Um, and would that mean that they manifest a second power? Or how does that work? Truth be told, I don't quite have that answered yet, but it was an interesting thing to consider. But another thing that I was thinking about was not only people having more than one fear and that being completely normal, but the idea that if your power is based off of your fear, which it is, that's just how that works, you'd be somewhat exposed to your fear every single day. And you might see where I'm going with this, but exposure therapy is real. And the more you're exposed to it, and depending on the specifics of what you are afraid of, there's a chance you would develop a healthier relationship with this fear, and you might not be as afraid of it, if at all, anymore. You know? Maybe somebody who's a huge arachnophobe is swayed by, maybe they like tarantulas as a pet, or maybe they like something like a jumping spider as a pet. And maybe they're exposed to it and they realize, wow, spiders are cool. And no longer are they afraid of spiders. And for this hypothetical, let's say they were a part of my universe. In universe, maybe they were so afraid of spiders they even manifested powers. What does it mean when they no longer find themselves afraid? I'm not saying every character will suddenly get so used to their fear that they're not afraid anymore, but for the reasonable few characters who would probably grow to have a healthier relationship with this fear, what happens to them? Do they have a power? What does it mean for them? One idea I toyed with was the one where when you get to a point, and this goes for like a solution for kind of everything, right? Multiple fears, loss of your fear of whatever it is you were afraid of. And the idea that I'd come up with for those two things to kind of solve those questions was when you are afraid of something enough so that you develop, I should say, manifest a power based on that fear, that power is imprinted onto you permanently. No matter what you might be afraid of beyond just that thing. So in this case, we'll say spiders. So beyond whatever you're afraid of, uh, when it comes to like, I don't know, anything else, maybe this person is afraid of millipedes or centipedes. Those are pretty freaky, pretty scary. And so they're not going to suddenly develop powers for centipedes, right? But they would still have their power that revolves around spiders to some degree, however that manifested. And this would make it pretty easy for me to not have to question or think too hard. But the reason I talk about this at all today is because I just don't know if I'm 100% on that idea. I don't mind it, but it feels pretty hand wavy as a way to go about signing off on the concept of exposure therapy and how that would basically be happening to a degree with every single character that takes advantage of my power system. Because everyone's powers are based on their fears, which means to an extent you're using your fear every single day, which means you would probably grow more and more accustomed to it, wouldn't you? Take, for example, the guy who is afraid of carpets. If his power manifests as some sort of carpet, maybe it's a friction-based power, he's still going to be, using carpets most likely to like generate that friction, and he'll be exposed to carpets every single time he uses his power, right? And it's like, what happens when they get to a point where maybe they're just used to it? I don't know. The idea is like, oh, okay, well, you will have this power for the rest of your life. Cool. But like I said, it just felt hand wavy. And to the concept of like somebody being afraid of more than one thing, do I want to exclude that from possibly being something, right? Maybe the exposure therapy and being able to really outgrow your fear can manifest as some way of like a, a different aspect of the power system, right? Maybe once you are afraid of something and you go beyond just conquering, your fear, like, and being able to use it as a power, but maybe you can go one level further and really take it to another level where it's not just a fear anymore, it's something completely different. maybe I can take that route. And then, like I said earlier, people can have more than one fear. So maybe it's fair to say that if you really are that afraid of two different things, you could manifest powers. And it's not impossible, I would say, but it would be really rare, and so it doesn't have to be something that I have to consider all the time. But if I wanted to have that option, right, maybe it would be nice to not exclude it, but instead allow it to be an option in case of an interesting character idea comes to mind, right? Be like, oh, they're going to be afraid of this, and then later in the story, they're going to be afraid of this, right? Maybe they had some like trauma that gets dug up in the past that they were, you know, cutting from their memory as a way to kind of cope with that trauma. And now it's being dug up in front of them, and they manifest a second power. But what does it mean to manifest more than one power? What does it mean to use more than one power? There's a lot of questions that open up when we consider that route. But I don't think I need to worry about that right now, considering what time it is. I just thought it was interesting to talk about this because, what does it mean to use my power system? Another thing that I had in regards to that question was a more philosophical approach. For a character that I have, which I don't have many of, this one's the most fleshed out. He is afraid of not knowing what's behind a door. His fear manifested in a power that allowed him to conjure doors anywhere, and they can act as portals leading to anywhere. Um, there's some other details about his power, but the basic idea is right there, right? Um, he can summon doors, they're portals, and he's afraid of not knowing what's behind the door. This character is able to summon doors, and he knows exactly what's going to be behind every single door. Now, I have some plot ideas and whatnot for this character, but the point is, when he's using his power, not only does he have full control of whatever it is he's afraid of, he knows what's behind every single door he summons. It, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's like he has full control over that which he fears. And that's kind of interesting. But in a way, he's not necessarily confronting his fear because he has basically full control over it, which makes sense. He's using the power. And you know what? I just realized it's how that works, isn't it? It's probably just how that should work. For those that don't know, I haven't mentioned yet, but if you can't control your fear and you let it consume you, you transform into a monster. That monster can use whatever power was imprinted on you, whatever manifested, but you kind of lose your sense of self. You become a monster. Everyone's monster design looks unique. If you conquer, whatever. I'm not going to go into all the details about the monster. The point is, if you can't control your fear, you get consumed. So maybe, just maybe, right? This guy's a perfect example of what happens when you can get control of your fear, because he basically did take control of his fear. He's gonna know what's behind every single door. Obviously, it's an easy plot point to have a random door that spawns every now and again, and he doesn't go through that door because he didn't spawn it, but he doesn't know what's behind it. He doesn't. He'd have to directly confront his fear. Like, ooh, scary, right? And maybe that can help me with the whole, because this character has been a wonderful blueprint for things. Let me tell you, this has been my greatest achievement thus far, is creating a character who's just let me find explanations. And days like today are really useful because this was basically a think aloud. Um, truth be told, yeah, this has been good. Because now it makes sense. right? If you can't control your fear, you lose control, you become a monster. You literally lose control of yourself, and the monster goes hog wild, whatever. But if you can control your fear, right? Fight or flight. If it's flight, monster. If it's fight, now your power can be used directly by you. And in his case, he's afraid, like I said, of not knowing what's behind a door, but his power revolves around him being able to summon doors, and he knows exactly what's behind every door. And if I use that as a blueprint for every single character, I think we can have a pretty interesting conversation. And it would really give me this great blueprint for everything. It just, oh, when things click. Now, it's important that I go to bed because I like this idea a little too much. And because of that, that means I need to think about it. I don't want to get too hasty. But, pretty freaking happy. How long has this attempt been going? 16 minutes. That's a pretty raw attempt as well. This is only like my second honest attempt at making this video. I only had like a 4-minute attempt before this, so... Huh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, here's my pseudo think aloud, I guess. We're gonna call it good. I'm pretty satisfied with that. Yeah, with that being said, though, I think I'm gonna leave it here. I'm gonna wind down for the night, think about it, wake up. I got some errands to go run with my mother tomorrow, so I'll think about it while I'm out and about. But yeah, I like that. I'm glad I was able to think about what it means to use my power system. Now I need to really consider the limitations. I have a good blueprint for how a power system would work, or a better idea of the blueprint, but now I think I really need to continue to put thought into this, because this is not it. We're not done yet, but it was a productive video today. With that being said, good night and good luck. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye bye.